This wild clip that I'm about to share with you is from a large documentary called Holy Redemption that I'll be linking to below this video on YouTube, which is about an Israeli extremist group backed by members of the Israeli government that is leading a violent undertaking of stealing Palestinian land. So it interviews both the extremists as well as Israeli human rights lawyers that are attempting to fight back against this, yet shows how the Israeli government essentially turns a blind eye as these extremist groups encroach on more and more land with settlements and outposts. So the clip here that I'm about to share is from members of this group as well as others going on a boat to view destroyed Gaza as an attempt to essentially look at what they view as their future land opportunity. So viewing this as purely entertainment and the idea that, oh...
But you guys don't understand. They're the chosen people. It's what the chosen people are supposed to do.
Hey, we can have this land. Watch this.
The main settler organizations are holding a conference near the border to select the first Jewish families to settle in Gaza. We are the only media invited to cover it.
ברגע שאני שומע את אותם הפצצות בעזה, אני מרגיש שהעם שלי חזק. משמידים את הרע בעולם.
You are the evil motherfucker.
As we hear Israeli...
Yeah, go ahead. Curl your little twigs. What are those things called?
They already discuss how much land each family will take.
Gross.
And the destiny of the people of Gaza, the exile.
How do you sign on to this? Like, how do you become so brainwashed that you listen to that guy and you're like, yeah, I'm so glad to be a part of this. He's definitely speaking the truth. It's a good place to raise children, they say. Gaza is a good place to raise children, says Shlomo Ishmael. Says, it's a good place to raise children. Gaza is a great place to raise children if they're white. This is Nazi shit, y'all. Oh, you don't trust me. They're definitely not sleeping in peace. You know what? The IDF bombs them specifically at 5 a.m. when they know they're sleeping. So there's no sleeping in peace. Perfectly normal, folks. Light the fire of liberation.
That same night, while Gaza is relentlessly being erased, they took a boat with the first families, ready to occupy the land of those who are being killed and starved to death.
Let's go look at our future home. Mass murderers.
מטרה של גרעיני ההתיישבות להתקרב ככל האפשר לעזה.
Settler movement leader. I mean, do they really unironically acknowledge themselves as settlers? Because, come on, Daniela, you old hag.
לראות את עזה כולה ולהבין שמעתה והלאה עזה תהיה כולה יהודית.
Yay, fireworks! God's will, it's God's will! We will build and witness the settlement of Zion and the settlement of the Israeli people in Gaza. She's a member of the Israeli parliament. Yeah, but the radical theocracy is definitely Iran, y'all.
So these people are completely deranged.
No shit.
Now, that woman you saw at the end there is this woman here. She is a member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset.
How many genocidal fascists in funny hats do we have out there in the world?
And is more of an extremist member. That said, there are many within the Knesset that view things exactly as she does, and they are aligned with Benjamin Netanyahu, which continues to help people understand why Benjamin Netanyahu... Putting aside, you know, what his own personal views may be, which I'm sure are also extreme, but his power is held up by people like this. So the reason I'm showing you this image here of
that's why there's no such thing as the bad apple theater. It's like theory. It's not as if we're led to believe that if we just oust Netanyahu, if there's some sort of coup, then everything will be fine. No, this is what a typical chode in Israel thinks.
Is because it is part of
she makes the typical Israeli settler seem normal.
Larger story where she was this recently in August last month defending the soldiers who were caught on camera committing extreme abuse of prisoners. So,
but there are heroes.
This stuff, again, I'm not even sure what I can say on.
They glorify grape. They glorify grape as they accuse their victims of graping them. I mean, think about how gaslighty and toxic these people are.
But it was very clear the kind of abuse that these prisoners were being subjected to, and she was out there defending these soldiers doing this.
They did. They turned the criminal into a celebrity. They paraded him on television. Yeah, Ariel Sharon was an absolute piece of shit, for sure. These are all just like little iterations. There's just constant iterations of this long line, this generation of genocidal fascists.
Wasn't the only one. As I said, she is not on an island here. A different Israeli lawmaker defended the exact same actions, who was actually a member of Netanyahu's Likud party, and he was asked, as he defended the alleged abuse, whether it was legitimate to do what happened. He said yes. Yes, he shouted in reply. Everything is legitimate.
Everything is legitimate if he is Hamas, and we know that he is Hamas, but because his name's Muhammad, so he must be Hamas.
Everything. Now, in terms of settlements, this has been, of course, going on for decades. I'm going to show you a map in a second here showing the progression over decades of these settlements and outposts. But
settlement expansion and the OPT violates IL must cease, many delegates tell Security Council.
I'm highlighting this article here from the UN because this in particular shows you this
was just before October 7th.
Going on, of course, before October 7th, but the UN, well aware of it here. Settlement expansion in occupied Palestinian territory violates international law, must cease, many delegates tell Security Council. The reason why there has not been any real action here is because the US has veto power. The US and other Israeli allies, like the UK, like Canada, stand up for Israel despite the clear violation of international law. And Amnesty International has a great breakdown here. Again, this article, I believe, is from 2019, so from a few years ago, but goes on to explain exactly where it violates international law. So Israel's policy of settling its civilians in occupied Palestinian territory and displacing the local population contravenes fundamental rights of international humanitarian law. Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention states, quote, "The occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies."
So that's good. When I didn't know what article it was, but obviously I cite this article or paraphrase it. The occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies. According to the Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, it also prohibits the individual or mass forcible transfers, as well as deportations of protected persons from occupied territory. The extensive appropriation of land and the appropriation and destruction of property required to build and expand settlements also breach other rules of international humanitarian law. Under the Hague Regulations of 1907, the public property of the occupied population, such as lands, forests, and agricultural estates, is subject to the laws of usufruct. What the fuck is usufruct? This means that an occupying state is only allowed a very limited use of this property. This limitation is derived from the notion that occupation is temporary, the core idea of the law of occupation. That's another thing that they must, they being the belligerent occupiers, the occupying force, must negotiate in good faith at all times to end the occupation ASAP. And if it argues in bad faith, that's also another war crime.
It also prohibits the individual or mass forcible transfers, as well as deportations of protected persons from occupied territory. The Israeli government is clearly in direct violation of this and has been for decades. Here is the a map shared from the Associated Press showing since the late 60s Israeli settlements and outposts in the West Bank. Gives you a clear indication of what the Israeli government has been able to get away with because of its alignment with largely the U.S., but also as well, of course, the UK.
That's why we say the two-state solution and the path to peace is just euphemisms for Israeli expansion, incremental Israeli expansion and adventurous governmental policies, and you can see it right there from this little time lapse.
As do other allies of Israel, but those are the major players. It continues to be incredibly frustrating to see.
You say one in 10 Israelis is now a settler. I would say 10 out of 10 Israelis are settlers, but I think what you're referring to is the fact that how many of them live in the West Bank.
The level of destruction, the violation of international law. But of course...
That's right, there's only one state. Well, there is only one state, and that state is Palestine, but right now we're living in one state, and it's occupied Palestine. And, yeah.
That the ongoing mass atrocities, the mass death at the hands of the Israeli government, be it through their direct actions, through the IDF, or also through, as this documentary...
Also, it should be known that just occupying the West Bank means also simultaneously as you are occupying Gaza. The West Bank and Gaza represent one territorial unit according to international law. But the fact that they've been separated, treated as two territories with different administrations, is a success for Israel's foreign policy towards Palestine. The fact that they've created in the international conscience this idea that the West Bank and the Gaza Strip are somehow separate from each other, both geographically, physically, politically, socially, culturally, etc., etc. The fact that people from Gaza can't go to the West Bank freely and the people in the West Bank can't go to Gaza freely is another war crime. So if the West Bank is occupied, then so is Gaza. If Gaza is occupied, then so is West Bank. Necessarily so. I mean, like physically, geographically, like materially speaking, they are separated. They're separated by, another occupying entity known as Israel. I mean, geographically, I just mean that they're separated by land, occupied land.
Extremist groups to commit these sorts of acts and continue expanding the Israeli land despite the Israeli government knowing what they are doing and simply not willing to stop it because, again, they completely support it.
Nixon ordered Cambodian genocide. Clinton sent cruise missiles to Sudan, people died. Obama gave the orders to do drone strikes.